How about now? Is the sound going now? I think I hit the wrong button there just a minute ago. Okay, so everything seems to be running on my end. I'm not entirely sure if you're not hearing it because my system looks good. If you're still having trouble hearing, send a message to the chat. Otherwise, I'm going to get started. We're going to have a pretty small group today just because, as I'm sure you all know, Crisis is a much more specialized and less long topic to go over. So I'm going to get started. Like I said, my name is Wright Smith. I'm the Director of the Historical Security Council. We will be discussing the Iran War in 1994. And this morning, I am going to do a discussion of an introduction to Crisis. So, in the crisis committees, there are two important kinds of crisis that you want to be aware of. There is committee-driven crisis events, and there are delegate-driven crisis events. Committee-driven crisis events are large announcements that the committee staff come and make. So, for example, they bring in a news article that says that a certain island in the South China Sea has been seized by the Chinese. Or there's, I'm seeing messages about static. I'm doing what I can. My system is a bit funky, so I'll see if that's working. If at any point you can't hear me and you have a specific question about what's going on or about Crisis in general, since I know this system on my end is not optimal, then you can email me directly at hsc@hmunindia. I'm going to send you all my emails so that you should be able to get in touch with me if you have specific questions on Crisis. And then otherwise I'm just going to continue moving forward so that I can get in as much as I can, and hopefully some of it goes through and you are able to hear me. So there are, as I said, delegate-driven and committee-driven crisis events. So starting over. Crisis-driven events are created by the committee staff, and they're something that you as delegates have to respond to. So, for example, you could be in the Security Council, and the committee staff will come and they will tell you that a certain island in the South China Sea has been seized by the Chinese government. You, as the committee, must now devise a solution or a response to that problem and vote on it. Should your solution pass, it will go back to the crisis staff, they will assess it, and they will bring in the response. So, for example, with the South China Sea, let us assume that the Security Council votes to impose a marine blockade around the island seized by the Chinese. The crisis staff will take this, they will read it, and they will come back with a new response. Something about perhaps the Chinese have sunk one of the blockade ships, and now you must respond to that. In this manner, Crisis drives committee debate forward and leads you to keep discussing new scenarios, new problems, and new issues in the general topic with which you're discussing. Just a reminder, if you're not in a crisis committee, then this will be of limited use to you for HMUN India, but it will be hopefully useful to you if you compete in crisis committees at other times. So, with that said, I'm now going to talk about delegate-driven crises. So, delegate-driven crises are crisis events which you, the delegates, drive through the use of notes, or as I believe you call them in Indian Malayan, chits. For my purposes, I'm going to refer to them as notes for the remainder of this discussion, and if you're not quite clear on this, feel free to send me a message and I will clarify. So, a delegate in a crisis committee has a certain position. They are an ambassador, you are a Minister of Health, Minister of Finance, Minister of Defense, you could be a general, you could be an intelligence agent. There's a lot of different positions that you could hold. In all of those positions, you have a certain set of powers which you can use to try and advance your own interests. You exercise those powers through the use of notes. So, for example, if you are a delegate in a cabinet, we have the Nigerian cabinet at HMUN India this year. So if you're a delegate in the Nigerian cabinet, for example, and your position is the Minister of Agriculture, then you, as a delegate, are in charge of all agricultural activities in your committee. As a result, you can use this to try and advance your own personal power. So, how does this work? This works through writing a note, a crisis note. A crisis note, or a crisis chit, will be sent, you'll fill it out, and we'll send it back to the crisis room, and they will respond. So what does this look like? You always want to address a crisis note to a specific person. So for example, if you are the Minister of Agriculture, you might want to reach out to the head of a farmers union in one specific local community in order to ask them to help you mobilize farmers against a certain government policy. You always need an addressee. If you don't address it to someone, it's very difficult for the crisis room to know how to respond to you. Along with this, you should have some kind of ask, some kind of question, some kind of request that you would like this crisis character's help in fulfilling. So in this previous example, that request would be asking for help to mobilize farmers to protest against a government subsidy plan, for example. So once you've written out your crisis note, always be sure to sign it. If you do not sign a crisis note, you will not get a response. I cannot make this more clear. If you fail to sign the note, you will not get a response, and we will tell you that your note was thrown away. Always sign your notes with your character name so that we know who we are responding to. Okay? Once that note gets sent, it goes back to the crisis room, just like a broader committee crisis response. The committee staff will read it, they will assess how to respond to you, and then they will write something back. So in many cases, this means that they will they will ask you perhaps for more information about what you are trying to do, and as you provide this, they will take actions to execute what you have requested. So in this farmer's example, if you were to ask for help with a farmer's strike, then the committee staff will ask, what is your objective in watching this farmer's strike? You could respond with something like, I, as the Minister of Agriculture, am frustrated by the actions the government has taken, which are crushing poor farmers and not allowing them to properly harvest their crops. Once you've sent back this additional information, then the crisis room will read it, and if they like the plan that you're trying to put in place, so for example the farmers' protest, then they will use this in a committee-wide crisis update. So committee-wide updates and delegate-driven crises are very closely intertwined. Good delegate-driven crises become committee-wide updates that the full committee must respond to. That is what you're always trying to achieve when you send a note, is to force the committee to discuss any one particular thing. So if you're agriculture, this obviously means you want them to talk more about food, more about farming, and so that way you will have more power and influence in the committee. If you're the Minister of Defense, you'd probably like to talk about war. If you're the Minister of Justice, you'd like to talk about internal security, about law enforcement, those sorts of issues. So your crisis strategy entirely depends on who you as a delegate are portraying and what you believe that delegate would like to accomplish. I'm going to pause here for just a few minutes and ask for any questions. If you have questions either about how crisis works in general or what I've been talking about so far, go ahead and send them to the chat and I will respond to them as I get them. So I'll wait for just a few minutes and see if anyone has any questions so far. Okay, so I'm not seeing many questions, so in that case, what I'm going to do is have us go through an example. So what I'd like you all to do, sorry, my bad, there was a question. Okay, so the question is, as I'm sure you read, how do delegates get to know what their position is, what ministry they are, etc.? So this will be assigned to you before the committee begins, and will form part of your background research and part of your writing of your position paper, that sort of thing. That is the determinant of who you are portraying and what your various interests are. So for example, in the Historical Security Council, we have 15 members. It's portrayed by 2 delegates apiece. You are assigned a country as a team of 2 delegates, and in your preliminary research before coming into the committee, you should assess what, for example, are the Soviet Union's objectives in the Iran-Iraq conflict, or what are the Chinese objectives, or the French, or the Indian or Pakistani, as both India and Pakistan will be on the Security Council and the Historical Security Council timeline that we have going. So that's how you know what your position is. It gets assigned to you ahead of time. What you will not know is you will not know what specific powers or abilities you as a character have. And so that's something that you need to research ahead of time. So you will simply be assigned Minister of Justice. You do not know from that assignment what specifically the Minister of Justice is able to do or not able to do. So that's something that you as a delegate need to research yourself and need to know coming into the committee. So in short, your position will be assigned, your powers are something you have to understand and research for yourself. Are there any other questions about broadly how crisis works going forward? So, seeing no other questions at this time in the chat, please do keep sending them as you think of them, because crisis is a tricky, frustrating topic that many college delegates struggle with, and don't perfect for the entire time for college So I think the problem with, okay, I'm seeing this stuff about the interference. The problem with the interference is I'm having to talk on a microphone and my computer is extremely low on battery. And so the problem here is whenever I plug it in, some interference crops up and there's not much I can do about that. I'm going to try and keep going as best I can, and as I run into problems, what I'll try and do is send it out as chats. And when we're doing the exercise that I'm about to describe, I'll plug this in for a bit and hopefully it will charge up some more. So, a crisis arc is what you as a character want to try and accomplish by the end of the committee. So for example, if you're the Minister of Agriculture, going back to our scenario from earlier, your broad goal is you probably want to do something like collectivize all farming and have it under your sole control. That's what you're trying to do. So how would you do this? What you want to do is think about who you are, what powers you have, and then try and send notes to put that goal in place. So I'm going to pause for a second and type some of this out to give my computer a chance to charge, and then I'll have you all do an exercise where you're thinking of this sort of thing yourself. Unfortunately, there's a lot of and some technical difficulties from my end. So I'll try and conduct a few more of these. Please respond to the scenario that was sent out. I will take any of the questions, and I'll probably end this a bit early just because I'm not sure how much use it will be if we're not really able to dialogue all that well. So, a scenario answer, and then we'll reconvene in the next or so. And if it doesn't include what we try to do, it's asking so that